The Caribbean turquoise paint should have caught the evening sunlight streaming through the garage windows. I should have heard the gentle creak of the door as I pushed it wider to reveal my pride and joy. Instead, I stood frozen, staring at an empty space where my 1965 Mustang convertible had been just 1 week ago. My hands trembled as I picked up the carefully folded note on my workbench. Mom's handwriting was instantly recognizable, the same neat script that had marked my lunch bags throughout school, now delivering a blow that knocked the air from my lungs. Olivia's venue fell through. The new one required immediate payment. "We knew you'd want to help your sister's big day be perfect." The collector paid $45,000, more than enough for Seacliff Gardens. "We can talk when you're home. Love, Mom and Dad." For a moment, the garage seemed to spin around me. 4 years of restoration work. Countless hours studying repair manuals. Every spare dollar spent hunting down authentic parts. All the nights Grandpa Charlie and I had spent working side by side before his passing, his gentle voice guiding my hands as we brought the neglected convertible back to life piece by piece. Gone. Sold without my permission to fund yet another of my sister's dreams. But as the initial shock faded, something unexpected happened. A strange calm washed over me like a cool wave. In the empty space where my Mustang should have been, I suddenly saw everything with perfect clarity, not just about the car, but about the patterns that had shaped my entire life. This wasn't just about a vehicle. This was about being the responsible daughter whose needs always came second. The reliable Emma who would understand, who would sacrifice, who would step aside, so Olivia could shine. As I stood in that half-empty garage, something inside me made a decision before my conscious mind could even form the thought. This moment, this betrayal, would be different. This wouldn't be yet another disappointment I quietly absorbed with a forced smile. This would be the catalyst for change I'd needed for 28 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The first time I laid eyes on the Mustang, I was 12 years old. Grandpa Charlie had just bought it from Mr. Donovan down the street, a rusted shell of a once beautiful convertible with mismatched doors and an engine that hadn't turned over in years. "Why would you buy that piece of junk, Dad?" My mother's disapproval was immediate as we all gathered in Grandpa's driveway to see his new purchase. Grandpa just winked at me, ignoring his daughter's criticism. "Emma, come take a look at this. Beauty." "Beauty?" My father laughed. "Charlie, I think you need your eyes checked." But I saw what Grandpa saw. Not what the car was, but what it could be. Beneath the rust and dents was a classic silhouette that possessed a kind of magic. While my parents and Olivia quickly lost interest and went back inside, I stayed in the driveway, circling the Mustang with Grandpa, listening intently as he pointed out features and shared his vision for restoration. "Most people only see what's broken," he told me, his weathered hand resting on my shoulder. "Takes a special kind of person to see the potential beneath the damage." That afternoon marked the beginning of a special bond between us. Every Saturday morning, I'd bike to Grandpa's house and we'd work on the Mustang together. He taught me the basics: how to change oil, replace spark plugs, sand down rust spots. I was a quick study, my hands seeming to understand the mechanical relationships, intuitively in a way that surprised and delighted him. "You've got the touch, Emma," he'd say proudly. "Just like I did at your age." My parents viewed these Saturday sessions as a sweet indulgence of a grandfather spending time with his granddaughter. My mother would occasionally comment, "It's nice that you humor Dad with his car project." She never quite understood that for me, those hours in Grandpa's garage weren't about humoring anyone. They were about discovering a passion that made my soul come alive. Olivia, 2 years younger than me, had no interest in our mechanical pursuits. Her talents lay elsewhere, in dance and theater and eventually photography. While I wore jeans and t-shirts perpetually stained with grease, she dressed in carefully, coordinated outfits. While I saved my allowance for tools and car parts, she spent hers on makeup and decorations for her constantly evolving bedroom aesthetic. Our family dynamic established itself early and definitively. Olivia was the artistic one, the social butterfly, the one whose emotional needs required immediate attention. I was the practical one, the responsible one, the one who could be counted on to handle things independently. "Emma's so mature for her age," adults would comment, as if my self-sufficiency was innate rather than a learned response to having my needs consistently deprioritized. By high school, our roles were firmly entrenched. When I earned straight A's, it was expected, just Emma being Emma. When Olivia managed to pull her grades up to B's after nearly failing, it warranted a celebration dinner. When I won the regional science competition with a project on automotive efficiency, my parents attended the ceremony but left immediately after to catch Olivia's dance recital. When I was accepted to Berkeley with a partial scholarship, the achievement was acknowledged with a quick "Congratulations, honey," before conversation turned to Olivia's anxiety about college applications. It wasn't that my parents didn't love me. They did, deeply. It was simply that somewhere along the way, Olivia's louder, more dramatic needs had trained our family system to pivot around her wants and worries, while assuming I would be fine regardless of the attention I received. Through it all, my sanctuary remained Grandpa Charlie's garage, where the Mustang slowly transformed under our combined efforts. By the time I was 17, we had replaced the rusted floor panels, rebuilt the transmission, and sourced an original steering wheel from a collector in Arizona. The car was still far from finished, but with each repair, each replaced part, each small victory, my connection to it deepened. "This car is teaching you more than mechanics," Grandpa told me one afternoon, as we took a break, sipping lemonade on his porch steps. "It's teaching you patience, teaching you that sometimes you have to disassemble something completely before you can build it back stronger. Good lessons for life, not just cars." When Grandpa Charlie was diagnosed with heart failure during my sophomore year of college, the Mustang project slowed but didn't stop. I'd drive home from Berkeley most weekends, ostensibly to visit family, but mostly to spend precious hours in the garage with him. Even as his physical strength waned, his knowledge remained sharp, and he'd direct me from a chair we'd set up near the workbench. "You're doing the heavy lifting now," he'd say with a smile tinged with both pride and sadness. "But that brain of mine still works fine." Sometimes, in those quiet hours with just the two of us and the radio playing oldies in the background, Grandpa would share stories about his own life. Opportunities missed, chances not taken due to obligations and expectations. "Don't let life put you in a box, Emma," he told me once, his voice unusually serious. "You've got a gift for bringing broken things back to life. Don't let anyone convince you that's not valuable." When Grandpa passed away 3 months before my college graduation, I was devastated. The funeral was a blur of faces and condolences. My grief was raw and overwhelming, while Olivia's was theatrical and public, her loud sobs during the service drawing attention and sympathy, her artistic memorial display of photographs earning praise from relatives and friends. In the weeks that followed, as the family sorted through Grandpa's affairs, I tried to make peace with the likelihood that the Mustang project would remain forever unfinished. The car was still in his garage, now about 60% restored, a bittersweet reminder of our special bond and shared vision. When Harold, Grandpa's attorney, called the family together for the reading of the will, I expected the house and most possessions would go to my mother as the only child, with perhaps small mementos for the grandchildren. What I didn't expect was Grandpa's specific bequest. To my granddaughter, Emma Claire Mitchell, I leave my 1965 Ford Mustang convertible, with the hope that she will restore it to its former glory, as we often discussed. I also leave her my complete set of tools and $10,000 to assist with the completion of our project. The room fell silent. My mother looked surprised, my father thoughtful, and Olivia slightly confused, as if trying to determine if she should be upset about an inheritance of an unfinished car project. Charlie was always eccentric, my mother finally said with a small laugh. Emma, if you want to sell it, I'm sure we could find a buyer who restores these things professionally. I'm going to finish it, I said quietly, but with absolute certainty. Just like we planned. That was 5 years ago. After graduation, I took a position at an accounting firm in Westridge, just 30 minutes from my parents' house. I found a small condo I could afford, but it had no garage. When I asked my parents if I could keep the Mustang and tools in their oversized garage while I continued the restoration, they readily agreed, seeming pleased that I would be visiting regularly. Over the next 4 years, I poured every spare moment into completing what Grandpa and I had started. I joined online forums for classic Mustang enthusiasts, studied restoration videos. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And networked with parts specialists across the country. Weekends and evenings found me in my parents' garage, methodically tackling each remaining task. Rewiring the electrical system, reupholstering the white leather seats, hunting down the exact shade of Caribbean turquoise paint that matched the original color code. My parents would occasionally wander into the garage, express obligatory admiration for my progress, and then return to their activities. Olivia, cycling through various career aspirations, photography studio, event planning, boutique ownership, would sometimes use my dedicated focus as a punchline at family gatherings. While some of us are out living life, she'd joke, Emma's still playing with her toy car. I let the comments slide, secure in the knowledge that this wasn't about living or not living. This was about honoring a promise, creating something beautiful, and connecting with the one person who had truly seen me for who I was. 3 months ago, I finally completed the restoration. The moment I turned the key and the engine roared to life, steady and powerful, tears streamed down my face. I'd done it. We'd done it. The Mustang wasn't just restored, it was magnificent. Every chrome detail gleamed. The paint caught the light like a Caribbean ocean. The white leather seats looked as fresh as they had in 1965. My first drive was a pilgrimage to Grandpa Charlie's grave, where I parked the Mustang and sat quietly, imagining his proud smile. We did it, Grandpa, I whispered. Just like we planned. Life seemed to find a new rhythm after that. I'd take the Mustang for Sunday drives along the coast, the convertible top down, wind in my hair, feeling a sense of accomplishment and connection I couldn't quite put into words. I'd spent 4 years bringing something beautiful back to life, and in the process, discovered parts of myself I never knew existed. Then came Olivia's whirlwind romance with Tyler, a marketing executive she'd met at a gallery opening. After dating for just 5 months, they announced their engagement, setting a wedding date just 6 months out. Our parents were thrilled, immediately throwing themselves into planning what my mother called the wedding of the decade. I was happy for my sister. Despite our differences, I wanted her to find joy and partnership. When she asked me to be her maid of honor, I accepted with genuine excitement, ready to support her through the wedding process while maintaining healthy boundaries around my time and finances. For a while, things progressed smoothly. Olivia secured her dream venue, a historic mansion with gardens overlooking the ocean. She found a dress, selected flowers, and created detailed Pinterest boards for every aspect of the celebration. Our parents contributed what they could financially, though they were open about having limitations given that they were also helping Olivia and Tyler with a down payment on a condo. I helped where I could, addressing invitations during lunch breaks, accompanying Olivia to cake tastings, offering my organizational skills to create spreadsheets tracking RSVPs and vendor contracts. But I was also clear about my boundaries, particularly financial ones. I had my own goals, including saving for a house with a proper garage for the Mustang and couldn't contribute the substantial sums Olivia sometimes hinted she needed for upgrades to various wedding elements. 3 weeks ago, I left for Portland for a week-long accounting conference that included potential professional certification opportunities. Before leaving, I secured the Mustang in my parents' garage, carefully covering it with the custom car cover I'd purchased to protect the perfect paint job. I'd ordered a period-correct radio knob from a specialist in Michigan, which was scheduled to arrive while I was away, the final touch to complete the restoration. The conference went well. I passed my certification exam and was approached about a potential promotion. I called my parents to share the good news, but the conversation quickly turned to Olivia's latest wedding crisis, something about linens and table settings that didn't match. I accepted this familiar pivot with practiced grace, looking forward to returning home and spending a relaxing weekend taking the Mustang for a coastal drive. Which brings me back to that empty space in the garage and the note that changed everything. As the initial shock gave way to that strange, clarifying calm, I carefully folded my mother's note and placed it in my pocket. I didn't rush into the house for a confrontation. I didn't call my sister in tears. Instead, I methodically locked the garage, got into my practical Honda, and drove to the one place that had always provided me with perspective. The coastal overlook where Grandpa Charlie and I had often stopped for ice cream during test drives as we gradually brought the Mustang back to running condition. Sitting on a bench overlooking the Pacific, I began to process what had happened with the methodical approach I applied to most problems in my life. My car, my legally owned property, inherited through a formal will, restored with my own hands, had been sold without my knowledge or consent. The money had been used to secure a wedding venue for my sister, presumably after her original location fell through. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a gray area. This was quite simply theft and fraud. My parents had taken something that belonged to me, sold it without permission, and used the proceeds for something that benefited Olivia. As the sunset painted the horizon in shades of orange and pink, I realized that this moment represented a crossroads. I could follow the familiar path, accept the loss, absorb the hurt, prioritize family peace over justice, and continue the pattern that had defined my entire life. Or I could choose differently. I could stand firmly in the knowledge that what had been done was wrong, and I had every right to demand accountability. For the first time, the choice seemed crystal clear. The Mustang wasn't just a car. It was the physical manifestation of a relationship that had validated my worth when the rest of my family system often overlooked it. It represented thousands of hours of learning, growth, and dedication. It was the legacy Grandpa Charlie had entrusted specifically to me, with full knowledge of its significance in our relationship. I would not let it go without a fight. As darkness settled over the ocean, I took out my phone and began making notes, organizing my thoughts and plotting a course of action. First, I needed to understand my legal position. Second, I needed to locate the Mustang and the buyer. Third, I needed to prepare for the inevitable family fallout when I refused to simply accept this latest sacrifice demanded of responsible Emma. By the time I drove back to my condo that night, a sense of purpose had replaced the initial shock and hurt. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter, one where I no longer accepted being the family member whose needs always came last. I slept surprisingly well, waking with the clear-headed determination that comes with absolute certainty. My first call was to James Peterson, a lawyer friend from college who specialized in property law. "They sold your car without permission?" he repeated after I explained the situation. "Emma, that's not a family disagreement. That's illegal. Regardless of their intentions or the fact that they're your parents, they had no right to sell property that wasn't theirs." "What are my options?" I asked, taking notes as we spoke. "Several," James replied. "First, we can demand the buyer return the vehicle, as it was obtained through fraudulent means. They may have recourse against your parents, but that's not your concern. Second, We can pursue the full market value of the car, which, based on your restoration work, sounds like it would exceed the $45,000 they received. Third, we could potentially pursue additional damages for the unauthorized sale of inherited property. The legal framework confirmed what I already knew intuitively. I had legitimate grounds to reclaim what was rightfully mine. But before taking legal action, I wanted more information about where my Mustang had gone and who now believed they owned it. My next call was to Uncle David, my father's brother who shared Grandpa Charlie's interest in classic cars and might have connections in the collector community. "Emma, I heard something about your parents helping you sell the Mustang," he said when I reached him. "Seemed odd, given how much work you put into it." "They didn't help me sell it," I clarified. "They sold it without my knowledge or permission while I was out of town." A long silence followed. "That's not right," he finally said. "Not legally or otherwise." "Do you know anything about who bought it?" Uncle David hesitated. "Word gets around in car circles. Raymond Blackwell bought it, that tech CEO who's building the modernist mansion up on Hillcrest. Apparently, he's got a collection of classics in a climate-controlled garage. Your Mustang is probably there now." Raymond Blackwell, the name, was vaguely familiar from local business news. His company had recently moved its headquarters to Westridge, bringing an influx of tech jobs to the area. "Thanks, Uncle David. This helps a lot." "Emma," he added before we disconnected, "whatever you decide to do, you're in the right here. Charlie left you that car because he knew you were the only one who truly valued it." Armed with this information, I made one final call to my office, requesting 2 personal days to handle a family emergency. Then I changed into a professional outfit, gathered my documentation, the will, insurance papers, restoration records, before and after photos documenting my work, and prepared to meet the man who thought he had purchased my Mustang. As I pulled into the visitor parking area of Blackwell Technologies' sleek headquarters, I felt a surreal calm. The Emma of the past might have hesitated, might have questioned whether she had the right to disrupt business relationships or create family drama. But this Emma, the one born in that empty garage space, moved with purpose and conviction. This wasn't about drama. This was about justice. The receptionist was initially hesitant when I requested a meeting with Raymond Blackwell without an appointment, but when I mentioned it concerned the 1965 Mustang convertible he had recently purchased and potential title issues, she made a call. 20 minutes later, I was escorted to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the town. Raymond Blackwell was younger than I expected, early 40s, with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to making quick decisions. He rose from behind a modernist desk as I entered. "Ms. Mitchell, I understand there's some question about the Mustang?" "Yes," I replied, maintaining eye contact. "The car was sold to you without the owner's knowledge or consent. That owner is me." That evening, instead of confronting my parents immediately, I did what I do best. I researched and planned. Anger makes you reactive. Knowledge makes you powerful. First, I pulled out Grandpa Charlie's will from my files at home. I remembered he had been very specific about his belongings, but I wanted to confirm the exact language. There it was, in black and white. "To my granddaughter, Emma Claire Mitchell, I leave my 1965 Ford Mustang convertible, with the hope that she will restore it to its former glory as we often discussed." But as I continued reading, I discovered something I had completely forgotten. A clause near the end of the document. "Any beneficiary who sells or disposes of their inherited item within 10 years without documented financial hardship shall return the full market value of said item to the estate, to be redistributed according to the secondary beneficiary designations outlined in Appendix B." My hands trembled slightly as I flipped to Appendix B. There it was. If I sold the Mustang within 10 years, the money would go to charity. But if someone else sold it without my consent, The secondary beneficiary was me, with specific instructions that the funds be placed in a trust that could only be used for starting my own business or furthering my education. Grandpa Charlie had protected me even after he was gone. Somehow, he had anticipated exactly what might happen. The realization that Grandpa had foreseen this possibility struck me with a wave of emotion. Had he known all along how my family operated? Had he observed the pattern I was only now confronting? The thought that he might have understood my position and quietly tried to safeguard my interests filled me with both gratitude and sadness. I remembered how he would sometimes watch family gatherings with a thoughtful expression, especially when my achievements were quickly glossed over to focus on Olivia's latest crisis or interest. At the time, I'd thought he was just being his quiet, observant self. Now I wondered if he'd seen more clearly than I had. Next, I contacted Harold Freeman, the family lawyer who had handled Grandpa's estate. Despite the late hour, I sent him an email requesting an urgent meeting the following morning. Then I methodically gathered all my documentation, the title to the Mustang in my name, insurance policies I'd paid for, hundreds of dated photos showing the restoration progress, receipts for parts I'd purchased, and even the special notebook where I'd logged every hour spent working on the car. I barely slept that night, but it wasn't anxiety keeping me awake. It was strategic planning. By morning, I had a clear course of action mapped out, with contingency plans for various scenarios. I was approaching this like an accountant tackles a complex audit, systematically, with attention to detail and documentation. Harold Freeman's office was located in a converted Victorian house in downtown Westridge. The interior had been modernized, but the architectural details preserved, creating a space that felt both professional and personal, much like Harold himself, who had been Grandpa Charlie's friend as well as his attorney. "Emma," he greeted me with a warm handshake, his expression concerned. "Your email mentioned an urgent situation with your grandfather's estate?" I explained what had happened, keeping my tone measured and factual despite the emotions still churning beneath the surface. Harold's expression grew increasingly troubled as I spoke. "Let me see if I understand correctly," he said when I finished. "Your parents sold the Mustang, which was legally your property through inheritance without your knowledge or consent, while you were away on business?" "Yes." "And they used the proceeds to fund your sister's wedding venue?" "Yes." Harold removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully, a habit I remembered from the will reading years ago. "Emma, what your parents did wasn't just morally questionable, it was illegal. The car was your property, clearly designated in the will. They had no right to sell it without your consent." "What about the clause regarding selling inherited items?" I asked, pushing the relevant section of the will across his desk. Harold read it carefully, then looked up with raised eyebrows. "I'd forgotten about this specific provision. Your grandfather added it late in the process. This creates an interesting situation. Not only was the sale unauthorized, but it also triggers this clause, which means the proceeds legally cannot be used for your sister's wedding. The money should be placed in trust for your specific benefit, as outlined here." "What are my options?" I asked. "Several," he replied, leaning back in his chair. "First, we can contact the buyer and explain the situation. Most legitimate. Collectors don't want to be involved in problematic transactions. Second, we can pursue legal action to recover either the car or its full market value, which, based on recent sales of similarly restored vehicles, is likely considerably more than $45,000. And third, we can enforce the clause in your grandfather's will. I want to know who purchased the car," I decided, "and I want to enforce the clause. Grandpa Charlie put it there for a reason." Harold nodded. "I'll prepare the necessary documentation. In the meantime, do you have any idea who bought the Mustang?" "Not yet, but I have a lead I'm following up on today." As I left Harold's office, I felt a growing sense of confidence. This wasn't just about emotional hurt anymore. There were clear legal principles at stake. My parents hadn't just disappointed me. They had violated my property rights and potentially committed fraud by selling something that wasn't theirs to sell. My next stop was Uncle David's repair shop on the outskirts of town. Dad's younger brother had always been more practical than my father, with a passion for mechanics that had translated into a successful auto repair business. More importantly, he was connected to the classic car community in Northern California and might know something about the Mustang's buyer. Uncle David was under the hood of a vintage Chevrolet when I arrived, his gray-flecked beard and oil-stained coveralls reminiscent of Grandpa Charlie in a way that brought a fleeting smile to my face. "Emma," he called when he spotted me, wiping, his hands on a shop rag. "Twice in 1 month. Must be a special occasion." "Not a good one, unfortunately," I replied, accepting his half-hug. "I need your help." His smile faded as I explained the situation. Unlike Harold's professional concern, Uncle David's reaction was one of visible anger. "They did what?" he demanded, his voice echoing through the garage and causing his two mechanics to glance over curiously. "Without asking you? That's your car! Charlie left it to you specifically because he knew you'd care for it properly." "I know," I said calmly. "But what's done is done. What I need now is information. Do you have any idea who might have bought it?" Mom's note mentioned a collector, and given the car's condition and originality, it had to be someone knowledgeable. Uncle David paced briefly, still visibly upset, then stopped abruptly. "Raymond Blackwell. Has to be. The tech CEO? He moved his company headquarters here last year and has been buying up every significant classic car in the area. Word is he's building some kind of private museum collection. His people approached me about a '67 Corvette I restored, but I wasn't selling." Uncle David scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Come to think of it, your dad was at the car show when Blackwell was there 2 months ago. I saw them talking. Your dad was showing him pictures of something on his phone. I bet it was your Mustang." The pieces were falling into place. My father hadn't just opportunistically sold my car when Olivia needed wedding money. He had been planning this, perhaps for months, showing off the Mustang to a potential buyer long before any decision was made. "Do you know how I can reach Blackwell?" I asked. "His company's in that new glass building downtown, Blackwell Technologies." "But Emma," Uncle David gripped my shoulder, his expression serious. "What are you planning to do?" "Get my car back, or at minimum, ensure the money goes where Grandpa intended, not to Olivia's wedding." He studied my face for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Charlie would be proud of you standing up for yourself. This family has a way of—" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Of taking your steadiness for granted. Always has, since you were little." It was oddly validating to hear someone else acknowledge the dynamic I'd lived with for so long. "You noticed?" Hard not to notice when you'd win some big academic award, and the conversation at family dinner would still be all about Olivia's latest drama. Charlie noticed too, used to get his hackles up about it. This new perspective on Grandpa Charlie's observations added fuel to my determination. I wasn't imagining things. The pattern was real, and others had seen it too. Armed with this confirmation, I drove directly to the sleek glass headquarters of Blackwell Technologies. The lobby was minimalist and modern, with a giant B logo illuminated behind the reception desk. The receptionist, a professionally polished woman in her 30s, greeted me with a practiced smile. "Welcome to Blackwell Technologies. Do you have an appointment?" "No," I admitted, "but I need to speak with Mr. Blackwell regarding a 1965 Mustang convertible he recently purchased. There's an urgent issue with the title and ownership." Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "Mr. Blackwell's schedule is fully booked today. I can connect you with someone from our legal department if this is a business matter." "It's personal," I said firmly. "And time-sensitive. The vehicle was sold to him fraudulently by people who didn't own it. I'm the legal owner, and I'd like to resolve this directly with Mr. Blackwell, rather than escalating it to formal legal channels. The mention of fraud caused a flicker of concern to cross her face. She picked up her phone, speaking quietly into the receiver while maintaining eye contact with me. After a brief conversation, she nodded. Mr. Blackwell's assistant will be down shortly. Please have a seat. Within minutes, a tall man in a tailored suit appeared. Ms. Mitchell? I'm James Reed, Mr. Blackwell's chief of staff. I understand. There's an issue regarding a recent vehicle acquisition? Yes, I replied, rising to meet him. I need to speak directly with Mr. Blackwell about a 1965 Mustang convertible that was sold to him without the owner's consent. James studied me carefully. That's a serious allegation. Do you have documentation supporting your ownership claim? I patted my portfolio. Complete documentation, including the title in my name, inheritance paperwork, insurance records, and extensive photo evidence of my restoration work over the past 4 years. He seemed to make a decision. Mr. Blackwell is in a meeting, but he has a break at 11:30. I can give you 15 minutes with him then, provided you're willing to show me that documentation first. That's reasonable, I agreed. James led me to a small conference room, where I methodically presented my evidence. As he reviewed the materials, his professional demeanor gave way to genuine concern. This appears quite conclusive, he admitted. Mr. Blackwell is very particular about provenance and clear title for his collection. He wouldn't want a vehicle acquired under questionable circumstances. At 11:30 precisely, James escorted me to the top floor, where Raymond Blackwell's office occupied the corner of the building with panoramic views of the coastline. Blackwell himself was younger than I'd expected, perhaps early 40s, with the relaxed confidence of extreme success. He rose from behind his desk as we entered, extending his hand. Ms. Mitchell, James tells me there's an issue with the Mustang I purchased last week. Yes, Mr. Blackwell, I replied, shaking his hand firmly. I'm the legal owner of that vehicle. It was sold to you without my knowledge or consent while I was away on business. If he was surprised, he didn't show it. Instead, he gestured for me to sit in one of the modernist chairs facing his desk. That's a concerning claim. I purchased the car from Robert Mitchell, who presented himself as the owner. Robert Mitchell is my father, I explained. The car was left to me by my grandfather 5 years ago. I've been restoring it myself ever since. The title is in my name, and my father had no legal right to sell it. I opened my portfolio again, presenting the key documents. Blackwell reviewed them with the sharp focus of someone accustomed to assessing situations quickly. The quality of the restoration is exceptional, he commented, studying the progression photos. I assumed it was professional work. Thank you. It was my first full restoration, but I had good guidance from my grandfather initially, and I'm detail-oriented by nature. Blackwell set down the documentation and leaned back in his chair. I believe you, Ms. Mitchell. This presents an awkward situation. The car is currently in my collection facility, having just completed a full inspection in detail. I understand this isn't your fault, I acknowledged. You purchased in good faith, but legally the sale was invalid. My father committed fraud by representing himself as the owner. What outcome are you seeking? This was the moment I'd been preparing for. Ideally, I want my car returned. It has significant personal value beyond its market worth. Alternatively, if you're attached to the vehicle, we could discuss compensation at current market value for a concourse quality 65 Mustang convertible in this specification, which I believe exceeds what you paid my father. Blackwell studied me thoughtfully. You're very composed for someone whose property was taken without permission. I'm an accountant, I replied with a small smile. We approach problems methodically. That earned a genuine chuckle. Fair enough. He tapped his fingers on the desk, considering. The car is remarkable. I purchased it specifically to complete my Ford collection from that era. However, he continued, I have no interest in owning a vehicle acquired through misrepresentation, regardless of how much I want it in my collection. He pressed the intercom on his desk. James, please prepare the paperwork to reverse the Mustang purchase and have Devin bring the keys and documentation to my office. Relief washed through me, though I maintained my composed exterior. Thank you for understanding. Don't thank me, Blackwell replied seriously. I'm simply correcting a transaction that should never have occurred. Your documentation is irrefutable, and frankly, I want no part of a vehicle acquired under such circumstances, regardless of its quality or desirability. As we waited for James to return with the paperwork, Blackwell shifted the conversation. The craftsmanship on that Mustang is impressive. Most restoration shops don't achieve that level of detail, especially on the undercarriage work. I'm a perfectionist, I admitted. I researched every component to ensure period accuracy, down to the correct factory markings on the suspension components. That passion shows. Have you restored other vehicles? No, this was my first. It was a project my grandfather and I started together before he passed away. Completing it was a way to honor him. Blackwell nodded thoughtfully. The most meaningful projects often are personal tributes. He hesitated, then added, My first restoration was my father's 1957 Thunderbird. He never finished it before his heart attack. I was 22 and knew almost nothing about cars, but I learned. Took me 4 years. This glimpse of personal history surprised me. Raymond Blackwell's reputation was built on technological innovation and business acumen, not sentimentality about classic cars. James returned with a folder of documents, followed by another man carrying a smaller envelope that I recognized as the Mustang's original document pouch, the vintage leather case Grandpa Charlie had kept all the car's paperwork in since 1965. Blackwell quickly reviewed and signed several forms, then slid them across the desk to me. This reverses the sale transaction. The funds have already been returned to the account they came from, your parents' joint checking account, he clarified, seeing my expression. Unfortunately, I have no legal way to redirect that payment to you directly. I understand. My attorney is handling that aspect separately. He handed me the leather document pouch. The keys and all paperwork are in here. The car is in our secure facility about 20 minutes from here. He wrote an address on a business card. Devin will meet you there at 2 p.m. to facilitate the handover. Would that work for your schedule? Perfectly, I replied, accepting the card. Thank you for handling this so straightforwardly. As I gathered my materials, Blackwell made an unexpected comment. Ms. Mitchell, Blackwell Technologies is expanding our classic vehicle restoration software division. We're developing applications that help restorers track projects, source authentic parts, and document provenance. Given your unique combination of accounting precision and hands-on restoration expertise, you might offer valuable insights. If you're interested in consulting opportunities, I'd welcome a conversation after this family situation is resolved. The offer caught me off guard. My position at Patterson Financial was stable but had limited growth potential. That's generous. I wasn't looking for new opportunities, but I'd be interested in learning more. Excellent. James will give you his contact information. Reach out when you're ready. As I drove toward Blackwell's storage facility, my mind was spinning with both relief and new possibilities. I'd achieved my primary goal, reclaiming my Mustang, more easily than anticipated. But the looming confrontation with my family remained. And now, an unexpected career opportunity had emerged from this crisis. Devin met me at the warehouse entrance precisely at 2 p.m. The facility was climate-controlled and impeccably organized, with approximately 20 classic cars arranged in museum-like displays. Each vehicle sat on a raised platform under carefully designed lighting that highlighted its distinctive features. And there, in the second row, was my Mustang. its Caribbean turquoise paint gleaming under the lights, looking even more pristine than when I'd last seen it. "We completed a full detail and mechanical inspection," Devin explained as we approached. "Mr. Blackwell's standard procedure for all acquisitions. The inspection report is in the document pouch." I circled the car slowly, running my fingers lightly across the surface, checking for any changes. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, perhaps even a bit cleaner thanks to the professional detailing. "The vehicle is in exceptional condition," Devin commented. "One of the finest restorations of this model I've seen." "Thank you," I said quietly, opening the driver's door and inhaling the familiar scent of leather and the special polish I used on the dashboard. After signing the transfer paperwork, I slid behind the wheel, inserted the key, and felt a rush of emotion as the engine started with its distinctive rumble. The sound represented countless hours of careful tuning and adjustment until I'd achieved the perfect balance of power and smoothness. "The exit code is 5529, Devin informed me. "Is there anything else you need?" "No," I replied, unable to keep a smile from spreading across my face. "I have everything I need right here." As I drove the Mustang onto the coastal highway, top down and the afternoon sun warming my shoulders, I felt a profound sense of reclamation. The car responded to my touch as if we'd never been separated, the engine's purr rising to a confident growl as I accelerated onto the open road. I didn't drive directly home. Instead, I found myself heading to Lighthouse Point, a clifftop overlook where Grandpa Charlie and I had celebrated each milestone in the restoration process. It seemed fitting to mark this reclamation in the same place we'd marked each step of the car's rebirth. Parking in our usual spot with the endless Pacific stretched before me, I sat with the engine off, listening to the gentle ticking of cooling metal and the distant crash of waves against the rocks below. For the first time since discovering the empty garage, I allowed myself to fully feel everything that had happened. The tears came then, not just from the hurt of this specific betrayal, but from years of similar patterns, my needs consistently deprioritized, my achievements minimized, my boundaries disregarded. Yet mixed with the pain was a surprising sense of liberation. The empty garage had forced me to recognize and confront patterns I'd been accommodating for decades. As the sun began its descent, painting the ocean in shades of gold that complemented the Mustang's turquoise paint, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront my parents tonight. I would give myself this evening to celebrate this small victory and prepare for the larger conversation ahead. I started the car again and drove to my condo, parking the Mustang in my designated spot where it would be visible from my living room window, a tangible reminder of both what I'd accomplished and what I'd reclaimed. Inside, I made a simple dinner and opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. As I ate, I created a detailed plan for the next day's confrontation with my family. Unlike my usual approach of minimizing conflict and prioritizing everyone else's feelings, this time I would center truth and accountability. My phone had been deliberately silenced all day, but now I checked it to find 7 missed calls. 3 from my mother, 2 from my father, and 2 from Olivia, plus numerous texts expressing increasing concern about my whereabouts. The messages revealed they knew something was happening with the Mustang. Blackwell's office must have contacted them about the reverse transaction. Rather than responding immediately, I composed a single brief text. "I am safe and well. The Mustang has been returned to me. We will talk tomorrow at 2 p.m. I sent it to my parents and Olivia simultaneously, then silenced my phone again. Tonight was for me. Morning brought renewed determination. I spent several hours organizing my documentation and preparing what I would say to my family. This wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about establishing new patterns for our relationship moving forward. At 1:30 p.m., I drove the Mustang to my parents' house, deliberately arriving early to park it prominently in the driveway where they couldn't miss seeing it upon my arrival. The rumble of the engine as I pulled in seemed to announce my presence with authority. Both my parents' cars were there, and Olivia's as well. They had clearly coordinated to ensure everyone would be present for this conversation. As I approached the front door, it opened before I could knock. My mother stood in the doorway, her expression a mixture of worry and defensiveness. "Emma," she began, reaching toward me, "we need to talk about what happened. There are things you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, stepping into the house. "But I'd like to hear your explanation in person." The living room was arranged for a serious conversation. Coffee mugs carefully placed on coasters, a plate of my favorite cookies on the coffee table, tissues strategically positioned on the side table. My father sat in his usual armchair looking simultaneously authoritative and uncomfortable. Olivia perched on the edge of the sofa, her eyes puffy and red-rimmed, clutching her phone as if it were a lifeline. "Emma," my father began, as I took a seat across from them, "we know how much that car meant to you. It wasn't an easy decision, believe me. But sometimes family has to come first," my mother finished for him, sinking down beside Olivia on the couch. I kept my voice level, determined to maintain the clarity I'd found at Lighthouse Point. The car was mine, purchased with Grandpa. Charlie's inheritance, restored with my own hands, registered and insured in my name, kept here only because my condo doesn't have secure parking. What gave you the right to sell my property? My mother leaned forward, her therapist voice activated, the same tone she used when mediating family disputes. "Emma, Olivia has been struggling terribly since the venue canceled. You know how much this wedding means to her. They had no other options on such short notice, and Seacliff Gardens required immediate payment. We looked at all options," my father added. "We considered taking out a home equity loan, but with retirement approaching and the market being what it is..." He trailed off, gesturing vaguely at the financial implications. "And this couldn't wait until I returned from my business trip?" I kept my voice level. This decision had to be made without even calling me? My parents exchanged that familiar glance, the one they'd shared throughout my childhood when discussing Olivia's situations. "The timing was critical," my father explained. "And frankly, Emma, we were concerned you might say no." His candid admission hung in the air between us. They hadn't asked because they knew I had the right to refuse, and Olivia's needs were, once again, taking precedence over my basic property rights. "So you deliberately excluded me from a decision about my own car because you suspected I might not volunteer to sacrifice something I valued for Olivia's wedding. And that seemed reasonable to you?" Neither answered directly. My mother shifted strategies. "Honey, we know you're upset, and you have every right to be. But what's done is done. The important thing now is focusing on the future, on Olivia's special day. We can look for another project car for you once things settle down." Her dismissive tone, reducing 4 years of meticulous restoration work to a hobby that could be casually replaced, ignited a fresh wave of anger. But before I could respond, Olivia spoke for the first time, her voice quavering slightly. "I didn't know they were going to sell your car," she said quietly. "They just told me they'd found a way to cover the Seacliff deposit. I thought maybe they'd taken money from their retirement account." This admission surprised me. I had automatically assumed Olivia had been part of the decision, perhaps even suggesting the car as a source of funds. "Would you have stopped them if you'd known?" I asked her directly. She twisted her engagement ring nervously, avoiding my eyes. "I don't know. I was so panicked about the venue. But it was your car. Grandpa left it to you." This small acknowledgement of my ownership rights felt like the first genuine recognition from any family member. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. I turned back to my parents. "Did either of you actually read Grandpa's will? The clause regarding what happens if inherited items are sold within 10 years? My father's blank look confirmed they hadn't. I removed the relevant pages from my portfolio and handed them to him. "Any beneficiary who sells or disposes of their inherited item within 10 years without documented financial hardship shall return the full market value of said item to the estate, to be redistributed according to the secondary beneficiary designations outlined in Appendix B, I quoted as he scanned the document. Secondary beneficiary designations? My mother repeated, leaning over to read alongside my father. I flipped to Appendix B for them. If I sold the Mustang, the money would go to charity. But if someone sold it without my consent, the secondary beneficiary is me, with specific instructions that the funds be placed in a trust that can only be used for starting my own business or furthering my education. It cannot legally be used for Olivia's wedding. The color drained from my father's face. Harold never mentioned this clause when we went through the will. Harold assumed you wouldn't sell something that wasn't yours to sell, I replied. I've already spoken with him and he's preparing the legal documentation now. I've also met with Raymond Blackwell, who immediately returned the Mustang once he understood it was sold fraudulently. Blackwell returned the car? My father asked, his voice hollow. Yes, it's parked in your driveway now, and he's returned the money to your bank account. But we've already paid the venue deposit, Olivia cried, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. It's non-refundable. That's not my problem to solve, I said evenly. The legal situation is clear. The money from the sale must be placed in the trust Grandpa Charlie designated. You'd do this to your own sister? My mother asked, her voice rising in disbelief. After everything we've done for you? Her question struck at the heart of our family's distorted perspective. What exactly have you done for me that justifies stealing my car? When have my needs ever taken precedence over Olivia's? That's not fair, my father protested. We've supported both our daughters. Have you? When I graduated with honors, you missed the ceremony because of Olivia's gallery showing. When I earned my CPA certification after 2 years of evening classes, it was acknowledged with a casual good job at dinner, while Olivia's completion of a weekend photography workshop warranted a celebration party. My mother's expression softened slightly. Emma, you've always been our rock. So independent, so capable. Olivia needed more encouragement, more support. So I received less attention because I handled things better? I asked. The question hung in the air, unanswered. Olivia looked between our parents with dawning awareness. Is that true? Have you really treated Emma differently because she's more self-sufficient? My mother fidgeted with her necklace, till I recognized from childhood when uncomfortable truths were being acknowledged. We never meant to make Emma feel less important. We just responded to what each of you seemed to need. What I needed, I said quietly, was for my achievements to be celebrated as enthusiastically as Olivia's. What I needed was for my boundaries to be respected. What I needed was for my car, the one thing that was indisputably mine, not to be sold without my permission. A heavy silence settled over the living room. My question about receiving less attention because I handled things better seemed to hang in the air, uncomfortable but impossible to dismiss. The grandfather clock in the hallway, another of Grandpa Charlie's lovingly maintained possessions, ticked loudly in the stillness, marking the seconds of this pivotal family moment. I never thought of it that way, my mother finally said, her voice softer than before. We just responded to what seemed most urgent at the time. Olivia's needs always appeared more immediate. Because I made them that way, Olivia interjected, surprising me with her self-awareness. I'd cry or panic or make everything sound like the end of the world. Meanwhile, Emma just handled things. My father leaned forward in his chair, rubbing his palms together, a gesture I recognized from childhood when he was working through difficult thoughts. The car is unquestionably yours, Emma. Selling it without your permission was wrong, regardless of the circumstances or our intentions. His admission seemed sincere, though clearly difficult for him. I can acknowledge that without reservation. Thank you, I said, appreciating the straightforward acknowledgement. And the broader patterns I've described? He exhaled slowly. That's harder for me to process immediately. It's not how I viewed our family dynamic. But I can't dismiss what you're saying either, especially with these specific examples you've provided. And the trust provision in Grandpa's will? I pressed, keeping us focused on the concrete issues at hand. My mother glanced worriedly at Olivia, whose face had crumpled at the reminder of the venue deposit problem. If the money legally has to go into a trust for your educational or business pursuits, then that's what must happen. But Emma, surely there's some compromise we can reach that addresses everyone's needs? Her question revealed how deeply ingrained our family patterns were. Even now, in the midst of acknowledging the problem, she was seeking a solution that would prioritize Olivia's wedding over the legal and ethical implications of their actions. This isn't about compromise, I said firmly. This is about respecting boundaries and ownership rights. The car was mine. The money from its sale legally belongs in the trust Grandpa Charlie designated. Those aren't negotiable points. What? About my wedding? Olivia asked, her voice smaller than usual. The deposit at Seacliff Gardens is non-refundable. Without that venue, everything falls apart. For once, I didn't feel the familiar pull to solve her problem at my own expense. That's something our parents need to figure out without appropriating my property. There are other options: scaling back plans, finding a less expensive venue, postponing until more funds can be saved. Postpone the wedding? Olivia looked genuinely shocked. Everyone's already RSVP'd. Then perhaps a venue that fits within the actual budget, I suggested calmly. My father nodded slowly. We could take out a home equity loan. It's not ideal with retirement approaching, but under the circumstances. Or we could revisit the botanical gardens, Olivia offered unexpectedly. They were actually my first choice before Derek's mother mentioned how photogenic Seacliff would be. This willingness to consider alternatives rather than insisting her problem be solved at my expense represented a small but meaningful shift in Olivia's typical approach. What exactly do you want from us, Emma? My father asked, his tone more genuine than at any point in the conversation. Beyond the car and the trust money, which are clearly yours, what are you hoping will change here? It was a fair question, and one I'd given considerable thought to since discovering the empty garage. I want acknowledgement that selling my car without permission was wrong. Not just inconsiderate or unfortunate, but fundamentally unacceptable. I want recognition of the patterns I've described and a commitment to changing them going forward. And I want my boundaries to be respected without me having to fight for that basic consideration. My mother reached across the coffee table, tentatively taking my hand. I allowed the contact, though I remained guarded. Those are reasonable requests, she said quietly. We can commit to working on these issues, including the deeper family dynamic issues, I clarified. Perhaps with professional help. These patterns are deeply ingrained. My father, who typically dismissed therapy as unnecessary hand-holding, surprised me by nodding. If that's what it takes to address this properly, then yes. I'll make some calls tomorrow to find someone who specializes in adult family relationships. As our conversation continued, gradually shifting toward practical solutions for Olivia's venue dilemma, I observed subtle changes in our family interactions. My parents seemed more attentive to my contributions, less quick to dismiss my suggestions in favor of Olivia's preferences. Olivia herself appeared to be making a genuine effort to consider realistic options, rather than fixating on her original vision, regardless of cost. By the time I left 3 hours later, we had reached several meaningful agreements. My parents acknowledged in writing that the Mustang was my sole property and committed to respecting my ownership rights going forward. They agreed to work with Harold to establish the trust as specified in Grandpa's will. Most significantly, my father had already used his phone to research therapists specializing in adult family dynamics and scheduled an initial consultation for the following week. As for Olivia's wedding, she had called the botanical gardens from my parents' kitchen, and discovered they had a cancellation on her original date. The venue cost was less than half of Seacliff Gardens, allowing for a beautiful celebration without financial desperation or property theft. Driving the Mustang back to my condo that evening, I felt a complicated mixture of emotions: lingering hurt from the original betrayal, cautious hope about the potential for real change, and a certain pride in having finally advocated effectively for myself. The familiar rumble of the engine provided a comforting soundtrack to my thoughts, a tangible reminder of both what I'd nearly lost and what I'd successfully reclaimed. After a restless night processing the day's events, I woke to a series of text messages from Raymond Blackwell. Ms. Mitchell, I hope the family situation is resolving satisfactorily. If you're available, I'd like to discuss a potential opportunity at Blackwell Technologies. Your unique combination of financial expertise and restoration knowledge could be valuable for a new project we're developing. The unexpected professional interest caught me off guard. My position at Patterson Financial was stable, but had limited growth potential. I'd never considered how my restoration expertise might translate to professional opportunities beyond accounting. I replied with cautious interest, and by that afternoon found myself in Blackwell's sleek office once again, this time not as someone seeking the return of stolen property, but as a potential colleague. We're developing specialized software for the classic car restoration community, Blackwell explained, gesturing to mock-ups displayed on his wall monitor. Documentation systems, parts inventory, maintenance tracking, provenance verification. The existing solutions are clunky and developed by tech people with limited understanding of actual restoration work. And you think I could contribute to this? I asked, genuinely curious about the connection. Your background combines financial systems expertise with hands-on restoration knowledge. A rare combination. The Mustang's restoration quality demonstrates both your technical skill and your attention to detail. We need someone who understands both the practical aspects of restoration and the systematic approach to tracking complex processes. By the time I left Blackwell Technologies 2 hours later, I had a formal job offer to consider, a position heading the development team for their restoration software division, with compensation significantly higher than my current salary and the flexibility to continue my own restoration projects. The opportunity was tempting not just financially, but because it represented recognition of both sides of my abilities, the methodical accountant and the passionate restorer. For perhaps the first time in my life, someone was seeing my full capabilities rather than just the practical, reliable aspects that my family had always emphasized. I drove directly to Lighthouse Point, the cliffside overlook where Grandpa Charlie and I had often stopped during test drives throughout the Mustang's restoration. It seemed the right place to contemplate this unexpected fork in my life's road. Parking in our favorite spot overlooking the Pacific, I killed the engine and sat listening to the gentle ticking of cooling metal and the distant crash of waves against the rocks below. The evening sun painted the horizon in shades of gold and pink that complemented the Mustang's Caribbean Turquoise paint. My phone chimed with a text from Olivia. Botanical Gardens deposit paid. It's actually perfect, more natural and intimate than Seacliff. Would you want to see it tomorrow? They can fit us in at 10 a.m. for a walkthrough. The invitation surprised me. Typically, Olivia managed her projects independently until she needed practical assistance or financial support. Inviting me to participate in the decision-making process, rather than just the implementation, was new. I can be there, I replied after a moment's consideration. I'll meet you at 10. Perfect, she texted back immediately. Oh, and I'm stopping by that vintage parts shop you mentioned once, the one that specializes in classic Ford components. Do you need anything while I'm there? Seems like the least I can do. This small gesture, Olivia thinking about my interests, without prompting, suggested she was genuinely reflecting on our conversation from yesterday. Actually, yes, I texted back. They might have the period-correct cigarette lighter I've been looking for. It's the last interior detail the Mustang needs. Send me a picture of what it should look like. I'll see what they have." As the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the cliffs, I contemplated how completely my life had changed in the days since discovering the empty garage. What had begun as a devastating betrayal had evolved into something I could never have anticipated: the potential restructuring of long-established family dynamics, a promising new career path, and perhaps most significantly, a fundamental shift in how I viewed my own worth and boundaries. The next morning, I arrived at the Botanical Gardens to find Olivia already waiting by the entrance. She waved enthusiastically as I approached, immediately handing me a small paper bag. "I found your cigarette lighter," she announced proudly. "The guy at the shop knew exactly what you needed when I mentioned a '65 Mustang convertible in Caribbean Turquoise. He said whoever restored it must really know their stuff if they're paying attention to details that small." I examined the part. It was indeed exactly what I'd been searching for. "Thank you, Olivia. This was thoughtful." She shrugged, AE's hint of color touching her cheeks. "It's the least I could do after everything." As we toured the gardens with the events coordinator, I observed subtle changes in how Olivia interacted with me. Instead of dominating the conversation and presenting decisions as settled matters, she actively sought my opinion on various options, listened to my suggestions about seating arrangements, and even scaled back some of her more elaborate ideas when I gently mentioned budget considerations. "You're really good at this," she commented as we reviewed the preliminary contract afterward over coffee. "Seeing how all the practical details fit together, not just the aesthetic vision." "I've always been detail-oriented," I replied. "It's what makes me both a good accountant and a good restorer." "I never really thought about your restoration work that way before," she admitted. "I guess I saw it as just a hobby, not something that required real skill and vision." "That's been part of the pattern in our family," I said carefully. "My interests and accomplishments tend to be categorized as practical or expected, while yours are seen as creative and noteworthy." Rather than becoming defensive, Olivia nodded slowly. "I can see that now. It's not fair, is it? And the weird thing is, I think it actually hasn't been good for me either." "How do you mean?" She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Well, think about it. Every minor accomplishment of mine gets celebrated, like I've won a Nobel Prize. Every setback becomes a family emergency. I never had to develop, I don't know, perspective, internal validation. Meanwhile, you've built this whole independent life because you had to." This insight from my typically self-absorbed sister caught me completely off guard. "That's actually a really perceptive observation, Olivia." "I'm not completely oblivious," she said with a rueful smile. "Just mostly. And maybe this whole wedding venue disaster is teaching me something important about finding solutions within my actual resources instead of expecting rescue operations." After the Botanical Gardens, I drove to Patterson Financial to submit my resignation. 2 weeks' notice seemed appropriate, though I half expected Ms. Patterson to ask me to leave immediately given the competitive nature of my new position. Instead, she seemed genuinely surprised and somewhat regretful. "Blackwell Technologies? That's quite a departure from accounting. Though I suppose your car hobby is relevant there." Her dismissive characterization of my restoration expertise as a hobby, echoing my family's longtime minimization of my passion, only confirmed I was making the right decision. "It's more than a hobby," I replied calmly. "It's a craft requiring technical knowledge, historical research, mechanical skills, and artistic vision. Blackwell Technologies recognizes the value of my combined expertise in both financial systems and restoration processes." Ms. Patterson considered this, then nodded slowly. "I had no idea you viewed your restoration work so seriously. We might have found ways to utilize those organizational skills more effectively here." "Perhaps," I acknowledged. But sometimes we need to be seen in a new environment to have our full capabilities recognized. Later that afternoon, I installed the cigarette lighter Olivia had purchased, the final piece in the 4-year restoration journey. As it clicked perfectly into place, completing the dashboard exactly as it would have looked in 1965, a sense of fulfillment washed over me. The Mustang was complete. And in a way, I felt more complete as well, not just because the restoration was finished, but because I was finally being seen clearly, my unique combination of qualities recognized and valued. The first family therapy session was scheduled for the following day. I had no illusions that one conversation or a handful of therapy appointments would immediately transform decades of entrenched family dynamics. There would be resistance, backsliding, and moments when old patterns would reassert themselves. But the foundation for change had been laid, and I was cautiously optimistic about building a healthier relationship with my parents and sister. Dr. Bennett's office occupied a converted Victorian in the historical district, with comfortable seating arranged in a circle rather than the confrontational layout I had feared. My parents arrived just after I did, followed shortly by Olivia, who had taken the afternoon off work to attend. "Thank you all for being here," Dr. Bennett began after introductions. "Emma has shared some background about what prompted this session, but I'd like to hear from each of you about your understanding of the family patterns we're here to address." What followed was both challenging and illuminating. My father, typically reserved about emotional matters, spoke with surprising candor about recognizing patterns he had never previously questioned. My mother, despite occasional defensive moments, showed genuine willingness to examine how her differential treatment of her daughters had created unhealthy dynamics. Olivia, perhaps most surprisingly, elaborated on the insight she'd shared with me at the coffee shop. How being cast as the fragile daughter had limited her development of resilience and independent problem-solving skills. "I've been thinking about this a lot since our conversation about the car," she explained. "Every time I faced a challenge or disappointment, the whole family mobilized to fix it for me. That seemed normal because it's all I've ever known." But watching Emma handle the car situation, methodically, effectively, without drama, made me realize how underdeveloped my own coping skills are. Dr. Bennett nodded encouragingly. "That's a valuable insight, Olivia. Often in families, we fall into complementary roles that seem to work in the moment, but create imbalance over time. Emma became the capable, independent one who didn't need attention, while you became the one whose needs were prioritized. Both roles can be limiting, in different ways." "I never considered how it might have affected Emma," my mother admitted quietly. "We just responded to what seemed most urgent, and Olivia's needs always presented as crises while Emma managed independently. And that independent management became expected rather than appreciated," I added. "My accomplishments were treated as routine while Olivia's smallest steps forward were celebrated as triumphs." By the end of the 90-minute session, we had developed concrete strategies for more balanced family interactions, including specific communication techniques and awareness practices for recognizing when old patterns were emerging. Dr. Bennett scheduled follow-up appointments for the coming weeks and assigned homework for each of us to complete before our next session. As we gathered in the parking lot afterward, an awkward moment of transition hung in the air. The uncertainty of how to relate to each other in this new framework we were attempting to build. My father cleared his throat. "Emma, I was wondering if you might have time this weekend to show me more about the Mustang restoration. I'd like to understand what was involved. Really understand, not just in a superficial way." His request, seeking to engage with my passion rather than merely tolerating it, represented exactly the kind of shift I had been hoping for. "I'd like that," I said sincerely. "Saturday morning would work well. The lighting is best then for seeing the paint details." "Perfect," he agreed, seeming genuinely pleased. "And perhaps afterward we could look at those car shows you mentioned. The one in Santa Barbara next month sounds interesting. Over the next 2 weeks, these small but significant changes continued to unfold. My father spent 3 hours on Saturday examining the Mustang restoration in detail, asking thoughtful questions about techniques and challenges I'd overcome. My mother cleared a special display shelf in the family room for the restoration photo album I'd created, giving it the same prominence as Olivia's artwork. Olivia herself began consulting me on wedding decisions not just for practical assistance, but for my aesthetic input as well, treating my opinions with new respect. The morning before my first day at Blackwell Technologies, I drove the Mustang to Lighthouse Point once more. The full circle moment seemed appropriate, returning to where Grandpa Charlie and I had celebrated each milestone in the restoration process, now marking both its completion and the beginning of a new chapter in my life. As I sat on the hood, watching the sunrise paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with the shock of the empty garage. What had initially felt like a devastating betrayal had ultimately become a catalyst for profound and necessary change in my family relationships, in my career path, and in my understanding of my own worth and boundaries. The Mustang itself seemed symbolic of this transformation. Like the car, I had been undervalued, my potential obscured by years of being taken for granted. And like the car, I was now being seen clearly, my unique combination of qualities recognized and appreciated in ways I'd never experienced before. My phone chimed with a text from Olivia. "Good luck today at the new job. Dad's telling everyone. His daughter is heading a software development team at Blackwell Technologies. Think he's finally realized how badass you are." I smiled at this evidence of shifting family perspectives. "Thanks. Your botanical gardens invitations looked beautiful, by the way. Much more you than the formal Seacliff style would have been. Right? Sometimes Plan B turns out to be what you really wanted all along. See you Sunday for family dinner? Mom's making your favorite lasagna. She's trying so hard." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, and meant it. Starting the engine, I listened to its perfect rumble with satisfaction. Whatever challenges lay ahead, in maintaining the new family dynamics, in navigating my career transition, in continuing to assert my boundaries, I would approach them with the same methodical determination I'd applied to the restoration. Grandpa. Charlie had given me more than just a classic car. He'd provided the opportunity to discover my own capabilities, to value my unique combination of skills, and ultimately, to recognize when patterns weren't serving me and find the courage to change them. As I drove back along the coastal highway, the morning sun glinting off the polished chrome, I felt a deep sense of alignment, of being exactly where I needed to be, in exactly the vehicle I was meant to be driving, heading toward a future that honored both my practical nature and my passionate craftsmanship. The empty garage that had initially symbolized betrayal had ultimately created space for something new to emerge. Not just the return of my beloved Mustang, but the emergence of a stronger, more clearly defined sense of self and place in the world. Sometimes the most painful moments become the catalyst for the most necessary growth, revealing patterns that might otherwise remain invisible for a lifetime. The car had been stolen, but in the process of reclaiming it, I had reclaimed something far more valuable: my voice, my boundaries, and my rightful place in the family. As I pulled into the Blackwell Technologies parking lot for my first day, I noticed Raymond Blackwell himself standing near the entrance, coffee cup in hand. He nodded appreciatively at the Mustang as I parked. "Beautiful machine," he commented as I approached, even more impressive knowing the story behind it. "Thank you," I replied, feeling a surge of pride both in the car and in my journey to preserve it. "It represents more than just a restoration project to me. The best ones always do," he agreed. "Ready to help other restorers document their journeys?" I nodded, feeling ready not just for this new professional challenge, but for the broader life I was creating. one where both my practical abilities and my passionate interests were finally being given the recognition they deserved. The Mustang gleamed in the morning sun behind me, Caribbean turquoise paint catching the light like the ocean on a perfect day. A tangible reminder that with patience, skill, and the courage to stand firm, what has been broken or taken can sometimes be restored to something even more valuable than before. After finishing our coffee at the Botanical Gardens, Olivia and I walked back to our cars in a comfortable silence that felt new for us. Years of her dramatic monologues and my quiet accommodation had been replaced, at least momentarily, by something more balanced and genuine. "I've been thinking," she said as we reached the parking lot, "about what you said yesterday regarding how differently Mom and Dad respond to our achievements. I started making a mental list on the drive over here, and it's eye-opening." "How so?" I asked, curious about her perspective. "Remember when you passed the CPA exam after studying nights and weekends for months? Mom and Dad gave you a card. When I completed that 2-day photography workshop last year, they took me to Salvatore's for dinner and invited Aunt Beth and Uncle David." She shook her head. "The contrast is pretty stark once you start looking for it." Her observation surprised me. Not the content, which I'd been aware of for years, but the fact that she was noticing it independently. "It's been the pattern our whole lives," I confirmed. "I think I benefited from it in some ways," she admitted, leaning against her car. "Having every minor accomplishment celebrated can feel good in the moment. But it also created this expectation that everything should be a big deal, you know? And it never gave me the chance to develop internal validation." She glanced at the Mustang. "Meanwhile, you were learning how to pursue things for their own sake, regardless of external recognition." This moment of genuine insight from my typically self-focused sister felt significant, perhaps even more meaningful than my parents' more formal acknowledgments of the problem. "Thank you for noticing," I said simply. "I'm trying," she replied with a slight smile. "See you at the therapy session tomorrow?" "I'll be there." As I drove to Patterson Financial to submit my resignation, I found myself contemplating the unexpected developments of the past few days. The empty garage had triggered not just the reclamation of my car, but potentially a fundamental restructuring of long-established family dynamics and an exciting new career path I would never have considered otherwise. Ms. Patterson's reaction to my resignation notice was predictably focused on the business impact rather than my personal growth. 2 weeks' notice? This is quite unexpected, Emma. We were considering you for the senior analyst position next quarter. I appreciate that, I replied, but I've accepted a role that better aligns with my combined skill sets. Mind if I ask where you're going? Perhaps we could make a counteroffer. Blackwell Technologies. They're launching a new division, focused on restoration software tools, and I'll be heading the development team. Ms. Patterson's eyebrows rose in surprise. That's quite a departure from accounting, though I suppose your car hobby is relevant there. Her dismissive characterization of my restoration expertise as a hobby, echoing my family's long-time minimization of my passion, only confirmed I was making the right decision. It's more than a hobby, I replied calmly. It's a craft requiring technical knowledge, historical research, mechanical skills, and artistic vision. Blackwell Technologies recognizes the value of my combined expertise in both financial systems and restoration processes. Her expression shifted slightly. I had no idea you viewed your restoration work so seriously. We might have found ways to utilize those organizational skills more effectively here. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But sometimes we need to be seen in a new environment to have our full capabilities recognized. After finalizing the resignation details, I drove to a specialty auto shop to install the cigarette lighter Olivia had purchased, the final piece in the 4-year restoration journey. As it clicked perfectly into place, completing the dashboard exactly as it would have looked in 1965, a profound sense of completion washed over me. The Mustang was fully restored, and in a way, I felt like my sense of self was being restored as well, not just reclaiming my car, but reclaiming my rightful place in the family and in the world. The first family therapy session with Dr. Bennett. The following afternoon proved both challenging and illuminating. The office occupied a converted Victorian in the historical district, with comfortable seating arranged in a circle rather than the confrontational layout I had feared. My parents arrived promptly, followed by Olivia, who had taken time off work to attend. "Thank you all for being here," Dr. Bennett began after introductions. "Emma has shared some background about what prompted these sessions, but I'd like to hear from each of you about your understanding of the patterns we're addressing." My father, typically reserved about emotional matters, surprised me with his candor. "I've been doing a lot of reflection since our conversation about the car," he admitted, "looking back at how we've responded differently to our daughters over the years. It's uncomfortable to recognize, but Emma made some valid points about the imbalance in how we've treated their accomplishments and needs." My mother nodded, though I could see the tension in her posture. "We never intended to create a dynamic where one daughter felt less valued," she said. "We just responded to what seemed most urgent at the time, and somehow that evolved into treating their achievements and needs very differently." "I've benefited from it," Olivia added, reiterating what she'd shared with me earlier. "Having every minor accomplishment celebrated while Emma's major achievements were treated as expected. But I'm starting to see it hasn't actually been healthy for me either. I never developed the internal validation Emma has." Dr. Bennett nodded encouragingly. "These are valuable insights. Family dynamics often develop unconsciously, with everyone falling into complementary roles that seem functional in the moment, but create imbalance over time. Emma became the capable, independent one who didn't need attention, while Olivia became the one whose needs were prioritized. Both roles can be limiting in different ways." Over the next 90 minutes, Dr. Bennett guided us through exercises designed to identify specific patterns and explore alternative approaches. She asked us to share examples of how typical family scenarios played out, highlighting moments where established patterns asserted themselves. The exercise revealed how deeply ingrained these dynamics were, appearing not just in significant moments like the car sale, but in countless small daily interactions. "For homework before our next session," Dr. Bennett concluded, "I'd like each of you to practice noticing when these patterns emerge in real time. The goal isn't perfect change immediately, but awareness of when you're falling into established roles. Simply naming it in the moment, even just to yourself, creates space for choosing different responses." As we gathered in the parking lot, afterward, an awkward silence fell, the uncertainty of how to interact within this new framework we were attempting to build. My father finally broke it. "Emma, I was wondering if you might have time this weekend to show me the Mustang restoration in detail. I'd like to understand what was involved, really understand, not just acknowledge it superficially." His request, showing interest in my passion rather than merely tolerating it, represented exactly the kind of shift I had been hoping for. "I'd like that," I replied sincerely. "Saturday morning would work well." "Perfect," he agreed, seeming genuinely pleased. "I'll bring coffee." That Saturday morning found my father examining the Mustang with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about the restoration process as I explained each aspect of the work I'd done. His engineering background gave him a technical framework for appreciating the challenges I'd overcome, though he admitted he'd never considered automotive restoration as requiring the level of precision and expertise it actually demanded. "The attention to detail is remarkable," he commented, examining the perfectly restored dashboard. "I had no idea how many specialized skills this required. You've essentially become an expert in multiple disciplines: mechanics, upholstery, paint, chemistry, historical research." "It's been a learning journey," I acknowledged. "Each component presented different challenges." He straightened up, closing the hood carefully. "Charlie would be incredibly proud," he said quietly. Not just of the car, but of how you've stood up for yourself these past weeks. He always worried about that, that your self-sufficiency might lead to being taken for granted. He mentioned that to you? I asked, surprised. My father nodded. A few times in his later years. Said you had extraordinary capability, but tended to let others define your value. He hoped the Mustang project would help you recognize your own worth. This glimpse into Grandpa Charlie's perspective added another dimension to my understanding of his gift. Perhaps the car itself had never been the most important aspect of his bequest. Perhaps the true inheritance was the opportunity to discover and assert my own value. The morning of my first day at Blackwell Technologies, I woke early with a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. After dressing in a professionally polished outfit that nonetheless expressed my unique style, I headed to the garage where the Mustang waited. Running my hand along its perfect Caribbean turquoise finish, I felt a profound sense of alignment. This car represented both where I'd been and where I was going, a tangible manifestation of my journey from accommodation to self-advocacy, from having my passion dismissed as a hobby to having it recognized as valuable expertise. The rumble of the engine as I started, it provided the perfect soundtrack for my thoughts. Whatever challenges lay ahead, in maintaining healthier family dynamics, in navigating my new career path, in continuing to assert my boundaries, I would approach them with the same methodical determination I'd applied to the restoration. Blackwell Technologies occupied a sleek glass building downtown, its lobby dominated by vintage automotive photographs displayed as fine art. James Reed, Blackwell's chief of staff whom I'd met during my initial visit about the car, greeted me at reception. "Welcome to the team, Emma," he said warmly, handing me a security badge. "Raymond asked me to get you settled in. He's particularly excited about your perspective on the restoration documentation module. The development team has been struggling to structure it intuitively for actual restorers rather than software engineers." As James led me through the office, introducing me to my new colleagues, I noted the respectful way he referenced my restoration expertise, not as a hobby or side interest, but as a valuable professional qualification. This recognition of my full capabilities, rather than just my accounting background, reinforced that I'd made the right decision in accepting this position. Raymond Blackwell himself joined us midway through the orientation tour. "Emma, glad to have you aboard," he said, shaking my hand. "I see you drove the Mustang today. It's generated quite a bit of interest in the parking garage. Several of our engineers were examining it when I arrived." "It tends to attract attention," I acknowledged. "Would you be comfortable if we used it as a case study for the documentation module? A project with that level of detailed restoration work would provide excellent real-world examples for the features we're developing." The request felt validating, my personal passion project now recognized as professionally valuable. "I'd be happy to share the restoration process," I agreed. I kept extensive documentation throughout. "Perfect. And how are things progressing with your family situation? Any resolution there?" His genuine interest in my personal circumstances surprised me, though it aligned with the thoughtfulness he'd shown when returning the Mustang. "We're working through it," I replied. "The first therapy session was productive, and my sister has been surprisingly receptive to examining the family patterns." "I'm glad to hear it," he said sincerely. "Family dynamics can be challenging to restructure once established. It takes courage to initiate that kind of change." The first week at Blackwell Technologies passed in a whirlwind of new information, introductions, and immersion in the restoration software project. My unique combination of financial expertise and hands-on restoration knowledge proved valuable exactly as Blackwell had anticipated, allowing me to bridge the gap between the technical developers and the practical needs of the restoration community. Meanwhile, our family therapy sessions continued weekly, gradually shifting from identifying problematic patterns to actively practicing new interaction styles. Dr. Bennett introduced structured exercises that helped us recognize when old dynamics were asserting themselves and offered concrete strategies for responding differently. Progress wasn't linear. There were moments of backsliding, particularly when stress or time pressure triggered automatic responses. During one Sunday dinner, my mother automatically served Olivia first and gave her the larger portion, a small but telling example of the unconscious prioritization we were working to address. But unlike in the past, she caught herself immediately. "I'm doing it again, aren't I?" she said, looking embarrassed, defaulting to treating Olivia as the primary consideration. Awareness is the first step, Dr. Bennett had told us, and these moments of recognition, however uncomfortable, represented genuine progress. Olivia herself showed perhaps the most significant transformation. As her wedding date approached, she managed most of the planning challenges independently, rather than expecting family mobilization for every decision or setback. When the botanical gardens informed her that construction would affect one of the ceremony locations, she researched alternatives and developed a backup plan before even mentioning it to our parents. "I realized I actually enjoy solving problems. Myself," she admitted during our 6th therapy session. "There's a satisfaction in handling things independently that I never experienced when everyone rushed in to fix everything for me." My father, initially the most skeptical about therapy, became surprisingly committed to the process. He created a conscientious practice of acknowledging my professional and personal achievements with the same enthusiasm he'd always shown for Olivia's endeavors. When Blackwell Technologies featured the Mustang in their corporate newsletter as an example of exceptional restoration work, he framed the article and hung it prominently in his home office alongside Olivia's artistic accomplishments. 3 weeks before Olivia's wedding, I received an unexpected package at my office. Inside was a weathered wooden box containing vintage Mustang emblems and hood ornaments I'd been unable to locate during the restoration, along with a note in my mother's handwriting. "Found these in the attic while organizing for the wedding. Thought you should have them. Love, Mom." The gesture, my mother thinking of my interests amid wedding preparations that would previously have consumed all family attention, represented a small but meaningful shift in our family's approach. That evening, I drove to Lighthouse Point, the special overlook where Grandpa Charlie and I had celebrated restoration milestones. The box of vintage emblems sat on the passenger seat beside me, tangible evidence of my family's evolving awareness. Parking in our favorite spot overlooking the Pacific, I killed the engine and sat listening to the gentle ticking of cooling metal and the crash of waves against the rocks below. The sunset painted the horizon in brilliant oranges and golds that complemented the Mustang's turquoise paint. As twilight gathered and the first stars appeared, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with the empty garage. What had initially felt like a devastating betrayal had ultimately catalyzed profound and necessary change in my family relationships, in my career path, and most significantly, in my understanding of my own worth and boundaries. The Mustang itself seemed symbolic of this transformation. Like the car, I had been undervalued, my potential obscured by years of being taken for granted. And like the car, I was now being seen clearly, my unique combination of qualities recognized and appreciated. My phone chimed with a text from Olivia. "Just finalized botanical gardens arrangements with zero drama. Did not call Mom crying once. Personal growth. P.S. Dad's telling everyone about your software development role. Think he's finally realized how talented you are." I smiled at this evidence of shifting family perspectives. "Proud of you handling it independently. And the software project is going well. Using the Mustang restoration as a case study for the documentation module." "It's really beautiful how things turned out," she replied. "Not just the wedding venue, but everything else too. Sometimes disaster turns into opportunity, I guess." Her insight resonated with my own reflections. The empty garage, initially a symbol of violation and loss, had ultimately created space for something new to emerge. Not just the return of my beloved Mustang, but the recalibration of my family relationships, and the emergence of a career path that honored both aspects of my abilities. The weekend before Olivia's wedding brought an unexpected invitation. My father called, asking if I'd be willing to drive the Mustang to the ceremony. Olivia specifically requested it, he explained. She thought it would make a beautiful backdrop for some of the photographs, if you're comfortable with that. The turquoise would complement her bouquet colors perfectly. In the past, such a request might have felt like another appropriation of my property for Olivia's benefit. But the thoughtful way it was presented, as a request rather than an expectation, with acknowledgement of my decision-making authority, transformed it into something I could genuinely consider. I'd be happy to bring the Mustang, I agreed. It would make for stunning photos. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect. The botanical gardens created a natural, intimate setting that suited Olivia and Derek's personalities far better than the formal Seacliff Gardens would have. The Mustang, positioned strategically near the ceremony site, added a splash of distinctive color that photographers immediately appreciated. What struck me most throughout the day was how differently our family interacted compared to previous gatherings. My parents made a conscious effort to introduce me to extended family and friends with the same enthusiasm they showed when introducing Olivia. My recent career change and the Mustang restoration received equal billing in their proud parental conversations. During the reception, my father clinked his glass for a toast. After the expected words about the newly married couple, he surprised me by continuing. "I'd also like to acknowledge Emma," he said, turning to where I sat. "Not just for contributing her beautifully restored Mustang to today's celebration, but for her courage in helping our family recognize and address long-standing patterns that needed changing. Her integrity and determination have made us all better." The public acknowledgement, particularly in the context of Olivia's wedding, which would previously have been entirely focused on her, represented a fundamental shift in our family dynamic. Later, as twilight fell and the garden lights created a magical atmosphere, Olivia found me at a quiet table near the dance floor. "Thank you," she said simply, sitting beside me. "For bringing the Mustang?" I asked. "For that, yes. But more, importantly, for forcing us all to see what we were doing. For not letting us continue patterns that weren't healthy for any of us." She twisted her new wedding ring, a nervous habit carried over despite the changed band. "I don't think I would have had the courage to do what you did, to stand up to the entire family system." "It wasn't easy," I admitted, "but it was necessary." "It was," she agreed. "And while I'm sorry about how it started, with them selling your car, I'm grateful for where it led. I feel like I'm entering marriage with a much healthier understanding of boundaries and independence than I would have had otherwise." Her insight touched me unexpectedly. "That might be the most meaningful wedding gift possible," I told her, knowing that something positive came from that difficult situation. As the celebration continued around us, I felt a profound sense of closure. The empty garage had forced a necessary confrontation with long-standing family patterns, catalyzing changes that might otherwise have taken decades to address, if they were addressed at all. Driving home that night, the Mustang's headlights illuminating the coastal road, I thought about Grandpa Charlie and what he might think of all that had transpired. His gift had ultimately accomplished far more than providing me with a restoration project. It had created the catalyst for restoring something far more important, my sense of self-worth and my place within the family system. The following Monday, I arrived at Blackwell Technologies to find Raymond waiting in the lobby, an unusual occurrence given his typically packed schedule. "Emma, just the person I wanted to see," he said, falling into step beside me as I headed toward the elevator. "The board reviewed the prototype of the restoration documentation module you've been developing. They were impressed, particularly with how you've structured the interface around the restorer's workflow rather than standard software conventions." "Thank you," I replied, pleased by the positive feedback. Having gone through the restoration, process myself gave me perspective on what would be most intuitive for users. Precisely why you were the right person for this project, he agreed. Which brings me to a proposal. We've been invited to present at the International Classic Car Restoration Conference in London next month. I'd like you to lead the presentation, showcasing both the software and your Mustang restoration as a case study. The opportunity to represent Blackwell Technologies internationally, to have my restoration work recognized in a professional context, represented exactly the kind of recognition my expertise had always deserved, but rarely received. I'd be honored, I replied sincerely. Excellent. We'll ship the Mustang over for the exhibition portion of the conference. It's exactly the kind of showpiece that demonstrates what our software is designed to document. As I settled into my office that morning, I found myself reflecting once again on the journey that had begun with the empty garage. In seeking to reclaim my car, I had ultimately reclaimed something far more valuable: my voice, my boundaries, and my rightful place both within my family and in the professional world. The Mustang now represented more than just a passion project or a connection to Grandpa Charlie. It had become a visible symbol of transformation, a reminder that sometimes the most painful moments become the catalyst for the most necessary growth, revealing patterns that might otherwise remain invisible for a lifetime. Outside my office window, the car gleamed in the morning sun, Caribbean turquoise paint catching, the light like the ocean on a perfect day. Perhaps that had been Grandpa Charlie's intention all along, not just to give me a classic car to restore, but to provide the vehicle through which I would discover my own value and the courage to insist that others recognize it too. Sometimes, what appears broken or lost can be reclaimed and restored to something even more meaningful than before. Sometimes an empty space becomes the foundation for building something new. And sometimes, standing firm in your truth creates ripples of change that transform not just your own life, but the lives of those around you as well. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.